So glad to see all of you here. I'll give people a couple more minutes while they're connecting their audio. And if you don't mind introducing yourself in the chat, saying where you're coming from, and if you have any questions about family history and preservation and interpreting, that'd be great. Okay, so we will begin actually. Make sure we are recording, yes. Hello everyone, welcome to May Day, Preserving the Black Family. My name is Aisha Heichel and I'm Manager Archival Services, the College of Charleston's Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture in Charleston, South Carolina. And with me today, I have our archival and interpretation team. You will hear from Ms. Georgette Mayo, who is our processing archivist, and Ms. Erica Veal, who is our archival project archivist and our interpretation specialist at Avery. And we'll each be taking a segment of today's presentation. So outline of today's presentation will include a little bit about who the Avery Research Center is and how to start your community archive. Then we will talk about treasuring your family collection, and then preservation and interpreting the Black experience, and then we'll have time for Q&A. The speakers will speak for about 35 minutes, and then we'll have a really time for robust conversation afterwards. You want to make sure you stay to the end because we have a special surprise for participants. So the Avery Research Center for African History and Culture is located at 125 Bull Street. Our mission is to preserve, document, and collect the unique experience of the African Americans in the Lowcountry. The building that we are located in was originally the Avery Normal Institute, which was a school built after Reconstruction. And we are a library, an archive, and a museum that hosts also cultural programming. Hopefully you were able to come to our digital programs we've been having over the past year, but we also do programming in person when there's not a pandemic occurring. But that is what we do. And so I want to make sure that we have a definition of each of these segments of Avery. Our archives are a repository of records. They have materials that are unique, original, and primary sources that are non-current documents. So these are your photographs, your letters, your diaries, your oral history recordings, audiovisual materials that are considered part of an archive. And then you have libraries. Libraries are, your public libraries, academic libraries, corporate libraries, and they have collection of materials that are organized and maintained for study, research, and leisure, but they're usually organized by call number or by Dewey Decimal number, or Library of Congress call number, and they are seen as individual items versus an archive, it's a collection of materials that can have multiple different types of formats within an archival collection. And then you have museums. Museums are charged with interpreting history, interpreting thematic issues, people, and they have people called curators that do this work. They work closely with archivists and librarians to create the story, a narrative that they want to tell in an exhibit. Curators can also be in physical exhibits or digital materials, digital exhibits as well. So I will be speaking about starting a family archive. So there's different phases as listed here, and we can go into more detail later, but the couple of the main phases is why are you doing this? And then in terms of like family history, are there other people already collecting your history? Are there already a person in your family that has a family historian? And are you assisting them or are you starting from scratch? And then you want to understand what is your mission and scope for the collection? Are you going to be doing oral history? Are you collecting documents? Are you collecting textile material, objects? All of those can be part of your family history records, family archive records. And so to begin, you want to make sure that you do a survey of what's already existing in your family. I know who has family photos, who has family home movies. Are there other materials already donated to different archive? Like some people have donated materials to an archive, either here at Avery or the Schomburg or the Auburn Avenue Research Center in Atlanta. Are there other repositories that have your family history? And are you going to be adding to that, or are you collecting new materials to be stored at your house? And then you want to make sure that you have enough space for the materials. Ms. Mayo will talk a little bit later about what that space should look like. But you need to be cognizant that you don't want to do it in the basement and you don't want to do it in the attic. Those are the main things. But then what is missing? Who is missing from your archive? Are there people that you know that you don't have records for? And so you want to make sure that you keep organized and keep track of your family records and who you've researched and where you researched them at. And so that comes into the strategy part. So how are you going to locate the materials? Are you going to talk to people? Are you going to do some research trips to an archive? Are you going to, do some research on your own to kind of show what kind of strategy are you trying to do? And then once you have the materials together, you want to make sure you describe the materials. And so we all know, we go through the family photo album, and there's pictures of people that you don't know. And you're like, I wish someone would have said who this is in this photo, right? Where it was taken, why it was taken, that kind of thing. And so as you are creating new photos, make sure that you have that materials into your photos or documents that you are creating. And then if you have a chance to talk to people who are in the photos that you are looking at, make sure that you talk to them, ask them, identify the people, identify the dates, because that will help you fill in the gaps of your family history. And then you want to make sure how you can provide access to the information. Are you going to scan the materials and make it available on Facebook or a private family website? Or are you going to just keep it internally and show at family reunions? And so you have to think about what is that access and outreach portion for your family archive. And so these are 4 strategies that you can kind of take. Start with what you currently have. Look through your family photos, look through your family file cabinets, and see what you actually have. And this is also in terms of people materials, people as a resource. Is there an elder in your family that you can talk to, or is there a family friend you can talk to fill in those gaps? Because we all know that people see events differently. And so depending on who you ask, you will probably get a different perspective on a particular event. And so that is also part of strategy 1, and 1 and 4, basically. big upcoming events like anniversaries or family reunions. Those are really good times to really come together as a family to understand what is happening, and to make a strategy for how to go about documenting the history and making sure that you record this family history, even if it's like a more conversation, informal or formal conversations. It's, those tidbits will help you going forth. And depending on how far your family is, and if you don't know your family records, you can try to do a call out in newspapers to see if people have, like people, ancestry.com, for example, they have discussion boards and say, does anyone have a last name Adams or Smith? And you kind of do a call out to see if there are people with your last name that may have family history records relating to your family. And then there's life histories. So there's a kind of difference between a life history and an oral history. So an oral history is really about a particular moment in time, like the civil rights movement, the war of Vietnam, school desegregation. That's a period of time that you want to focus your research on. But a life history is more comprehensive. It's starting from when they were a child up to the present time. And those life histories are much more comprehensive and then also time intensive. So some examples, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, they have the called Community-Driven Archive Project. And one of the resources they have on the website is this oral history question cards. And you can go to the website and you can download a PDF of these kind of questions that you can pose to your family members about particular topics and themes to kind of get the conversation going if you're stumped for how to get started. Additionally, another resource is from the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. They do an annual theme every year, and this year, for 2021, the theme is Black family representation, identity, and diversity. And as part of that, one of the committees started this resource guide. And one of the pages on the guide about family history. And so these are the different sections about family history that you can access available at this link. And with that, I will turn over to my colleague, Mr. Jet Mayo.
Thank you, Aisha, and greetings, everyone. My name is Georgette Mayo, and I will be giving you pointers on how to preserve your treasures. And part of the method of doing this is to explore your own history and your family history, whether it's the family, your neighborhood, or a larger community. And these tips come from the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. Next slide, please. Okay. Reduce the amount of light that strikes your treasures, especially direct sunlight, and especially in the summer, whether it's internal and definitely away from the sun. Like you might have a favorite photograph, you think that you might want light on it, but you want to keep it away from the sun, the sunlight that streams in your house. Next, you want to maintain a stable temperature in a comfortable range. It is important to keep the temperature constant and to provide a cool, dry space for your treasures. You definitely want to protect your treasured items from contaminants like soot, dirt, and dust, and from cleaning solvents and storage boxes or bins made of poor quality. You definitely don't want to have the situation that we have in this picture here, where we look like we have a book that is almost buried in dirt. Fight the good fight against bugs, pests, and rodents, and never give up. Prevent moisture and humidity from reaching your treasures. If you have things that's stored in plastic, that is definitely a no-no. You want to make sure that your articles, particularly photographs, are in an archival container or in what we call plastilines. And I'll discuss that a little bit further under when we talk about supplies. But you want to make sure that even though you're keeping your items in a environment that is away from the light and basically in a healthy environment. And check on them frequently to make sure that there is no humidity and moisture building up in your environment that you have your storage. And think before you act. Unfortunately, human beings are the biggest danger to valuable artifacts. Salts and soils on your hands can speed deterioration, and less than graceful moves can scratch, break, or crush fragile items. Careless decisions can result in irreparable problems. Collecting and preserving treasures of your personal use does not have to be expensive. Consider some of the items we have suggested that you use. You may not need to use all of them, and none of them should be very expensive. And we have a source that we use at Avery, this Gaylord, and I have that email address in the following slide. One clarification, where I have indicated vacuum cleaner, you definitely don't want to use a big vacuum cleaner. You want to use the one that's handheld, the little vacs that you use for your car. And a lot of these can be readily available in your own house already, like your mild liquid detergent, your paper towels or soft rags. You use a soft white cotton rag from like an old t-shirt, plastic storage bins. And a tip for using the gloves. If you use white cotton gloves, clean them periodically. Wash them by hand or separately by machine. Use warm water and mild soap. Do not use bleach. Rinse thoroughly, and do not use fabric softeners in the dryer when you dry them. Dry them out by hand, away, not in a dryer. And indicated is the archival supplies that's indicated on the slide. As I said, that we use Gaylord. They're a very reputable company, and they specialize in archival materials of all types, small and large. And if you have any further questions, if you want a copy of the slide in regards to the list of supplies that would be used in preserving your family history, please contact me at mayog@cofc.edu. Thank you.
Before I turn it over to Ms. Erica Veal, please remember to put your questions in the chat, and we will get to them as soon as the petition are over. Thank you. Ms. Erica?
All right. Greetings, everyone. My name is Erica Veal, and I'm the Project Archivist and Interpretation Specialist at the Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture. And I'm going to be talking about preservation and interpreting the Black experience briefly today. So next slide. Without the items that we preserve, interpreting the Black experience would be difficult. So next slide. For those who don't know, interpretation is a mission-based communication process. It forges emotional and intellectual connections between the interests of the audience and the meanings inherent in the resource. So I am a certified interpreter. I'm certified through the National Association for Interpretation. And basically I am a professional communicator. I interpret cultural history and natural history. So I interpret the history of people, as well as the history of plants and the environment. In terms of my work at Avery, my focus is interpreting the Black experience. And our discussion today with regard to preserving our family histories and best practices for doing that are really, really important to the work that I do. Next slide. So if you've ever been on a tour of like a historic site or a national park or like the aquarium, you've probably come in contact with a professional interpreter. And it's really important for us to interpret our own story. So when we're talking about interpreting the African-American experience, we really need more Black interpreters, professional Black interpreters and certified Black interpreters. And that's something that, if you're interested in learning more about, feel free to reach out to me and we can discuss that further. But yeah, interpreting our own histories is important because there's a lot of people, especially in Charleston, we're such a #1 tourist destination and people come here from all over the world to experience, the Gullah Geechee history and culture that is so alive, well, and thriving in Charleston. Eat the food, hear the language, visit the sites, see the architecture that was built by our ancestors. And there are a lot of tour companies in the city. They're not all built equally. They don't all tell the stories equally. We've had an issue historically with folks romanticizing difficult histories. So the more we are engaged in telling our own stories, the more we are able to control the narrative, make sure that it's accurate, and we're getting the message across in terms of our history, because we know Black history is a huge part of American history. Next slide, please. So in terms of interpretation, preservation facilitates interpretation. As an interpreter, it's really, really important to know your resource. So that means constantly researching topics so that we're as knowledgeable as possible about the information that we're conveying. When you come to the Avery Research Center, when we are open to the public, when it's not a pandemic and we're giving tours, when you leave one of my tours, I want you to leave feeling emotionally connected, understanding African-American history and the Black experience in a way that you didn't before. I want you to leave a donation in the donation bin. I want you to come back and volunteer. I want you to, follow us on social media and share, resources about the Avery, share our programs and help us promote. Like, I really want you to become invested in the Avery. And that's what interpretive techniques teach me how to do, so that I can engage with each person on a personal level so that they can care about Avery. And in order to do that, I have to know my resource. So next slide, please. So why is Avery so important to this? Because it's just like we've been talking about this entire discussion, it's a repository, that's to say a place that houses items and preserves items of significance to the Black experience. So for people like me, interpreters or researchers like some of you who want to know more, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without places like the Avery. Avery has vertical file collections like we talked about, our archives, lots of historic documents and images. We've got artifacts and different things that have been digitized and put into a digital format, so you can even access them without coming to the building. And then we have a huge library on the Black experience. Next slide, please. So at Avery, we preserve movements. And some of the images that we have here are some of the most widely researched and requested collections that we have at Avery. So we have Septima Clark in the top right. Obviously, we have Dr. Martin Luther King and Ralph Abernathy. Next to that, the bottom left, we have Dorothy Cotton and Jesse Jackson. And then we also have Coretta Scott King. And all of these images came from the Septima P. Clark collection. Next slide, please. So in addition to preserving movements, we also preserve individuals. These documents here are from the Cleveland J. Sellers papers. So we've got political flyers from when he ran for city council in North Carolina. We've got meeting minutes from the Malcolm X University Council meeting of elders. Then an image of Cleveland Sellers, and which may actually have been taken after he got out of jail. And then we also have a periodical, Africa Must Unite. So yeah, Avery's got really, really cool stuff in our archive. It's really easy to get lost in all of the treasures that we have housed at the Avery. As someone who's, in addition to doing interpreting and tours and training our student workers, I also work in the archive, and I get to respond to researchers' requests and pulling documents for researchers. It's so easy to just get caught up and just lost in the plethora of amazing images and documents that we have, especially if you're somebody like me who's really passionate about history, and I nerd out over this stuff. Somebody referred to it as nerd vomit, and I eat it up. So next slide, please. So we also preserve organizations. And what you see on the screen here are actually some flyers from the Low Country Action Committee. So in addition to all the work that I do at Avery, I also do community organizing. And that's something that, learning about the history of Avery when it was a school, when it was the Avery Normal Institute, it really influenced me to want to be really active in my community. I did my master's thesis on James Ebert Campbell, who his mother and grandmother were Avery graduates. And he went on to be an educator and did a lot of work in New York. He taught in Tanzania, and he helped bring Black studies. He helped create that as a field of study at the college level, middle school level as well. So he was very instrumental in that movement for cultural studies back in the 60s and 70s. And when I was studying his life, especially like his mother was a huge influence on him. And again, she was an Avery graduate. And one of the things that I learned just looking at her experiences at Avery was how invested they were into community and mutual aid and supporting one another's needs. And I remember thinking to myself, 10, 15 years ago when I was working on my thesis, like what changed? Why is it that we don't support our community the way that, once was just the norm? It was just the default. I just asked myself that. And so it really influenced me to want to be active in my community. So last year, I, along with some other Avery folks and some other folks from the community, co-founded the Low Country Action Committee. And it is a Black-led grassroots organization that is dedicated to Black liberation through service, political education, and collective action in the Low Country. And so what you see here are some flyers from some events that we have put on. For example, we do a monthly food drive, and then that's what you see in the image in the middle. It's called Food for Thought, and we give away food, fresh organic produce, and what else do we give away? PPE, toiletries, and then we also include educational materials. So the flyers that you see on the left and right, the one on the left says, "What is heirs property?" And it's kind of talking about what that is. And then the one on the one on the left is what is heirs property. The one on the right is about mutual aid. That is solidarity, not charity. And so every time we give away a grocery bag, we include educational material in it. And what I would like to do is, what I'm in the process of doing is keeping a record and printing out every flyer from every event that we do. And I'm also, we've been, keeping minutes at our meetings since January. So in June, I'm going to print out all of our meeting minutes from January through June, and I'm going to start creating an archive so that I can preserve the history of this organization and the work that we're doing. So when we take the time to document the work that we're doing and create our own archives and then donate to existing archives, places like Avery, we are actively preserving the history of our community, and we're making it available to not only current generations, but future generations as well. And as a historical interpreter, I couldn't do my job without access to these types of records and resources. So whatever work that you're doing in the community, or even the history of your family, like, don't ever think that it's not important to document, because it really is important. So in addition to preserving this, the work of the organizations that I helped co-found, I also, have taken the time to create a family archive as well. So all of these things are really important. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you so much, Erica, for that connection between interpreting and collections and how that can help us tell a fuller narrative of Black experience. History is not made from big people, it's made from everyone, right? And so that is what family archives can help us tell that story, the everyday person's story of America, of history of a region. And so to help with that, the Avery Research Center wants to raffle off 2 items. One is a Gaylord Family History Kit. As Mayo mentioned earlier, Gaylord is a company that we use at Avery to get our archival supplies, and want to get individual who's attending that kickstart with their own family history kit. And so the kit contains these items that are listed here, and a picture of it is on the left here. And so we want to make sure that we get you off the good start. We'll tell you how to enter the raffle in a minute. The next item we'll be raffling off is a book called Creating Family Archives by archivist and scholar Margaret Note. So there will be 2 winners for this raffle, one of the kit and one of the book. And to enter the raffle, you will have to fill out this form. We'll put the link to the form in the chat in a minute, and it will be up for consideration up until Friday, May 14th. May 14th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure you fill out the raffle, and you'll get contacted about how to pick up your item if you are the winner. And now it is time for Q&A. I see some chat. I couldn't see it throughout the day. So I will stop sharing and see what comments we have. Okay, so we have Margaret Ford in Chicago by way of South Carolina. Welcome, Margaret. We have Dr. Chris DeWeld, who is a woman gender studies. Welcome, Chris. Vicki, okay, Vicki question. Thank you, Vicki. How do you decide what pictures in your family photo album to keep? The albums include a lot of travel photos. What is the best way or place to keep them? Okay, photos. So we all, depending on generation that you're in, some family photos are in that sticky photo album that you peel it off and you hear that crackling sound, like, oh my God. And so you want to make sure that you don't use, you can remove your photos from that album into an archive safe album. And Gaylord has photo albums you can purchase. If you don't want to, if you're okay with disassembling the photo album, you can put the individual photos into a slide. to a sleeve, a photographic sleeve, and that will also preserve it from like people touching it and fingerprints and things like that. And so how you decide what to keep, that's really based on your own perspective. I know sometimes we have photos that are basically of the same event. Someone's just looking a different way, and so we don't want to just keep all the copies of a particular event. You just the important ones or the ones that feature people you actually know are important to family's story are the way to consider which one to keep. I don't know, Miss Mayo or Miss Erica has another perspective on that.
Well, definitely keep the ones that you like. If it's a family decision, ask, make it an evening where you're just reminiscing over old photographs, and let the family also decide, have a decision on what will be selected. And while we're doing this, make sure you identify your photographs. There's a special pen that you can use, and let me pull it out. It's called a Pigma Micron, and it's archival ink. And these should be the only type of pens that you actually use on the back of a photograph, because other pens will eventually damage the image. Again, duplicates are good in the respect of, if you want to display a photograph, use a duplicate. Keep the original in a safe place.
Definitely. So you scan them to cloud storage. Make sure that when you do scan them, that you are creating a numbering system and a file naming system that is consistent and that can provide context. So you don't want to have your filing system Jane Smith, ABC in London. You want to make sure you can put that information in a spreadsheet. And so we're making sure that your file name is like, Jane Smith, London, 2012 or something. And then in your spreadsheet, you can describe what she's actually doing in the photo. So keep them separate if you are going to digitize items like that. Hope that answered the question, Vicki. If not, comment again. Erica, welcome.
Hey, I had a question about potential donations to the Avery Research Center. Did you want to expand on the process that we have right now?
Yes, so that's great. They want to donate your materials. So due to COVID, we are not accepting material at the moment, not until the late summer, fall. But what we do as archivists, we consult with you, the donor, and we review what is actually in the materials that you want to donate. And then depending on the breadth of materials that we can, if we want to accept everything at Avery, or if we can only take a certain amount of materials, depending on our collection scope and needs. And then we have a couple forms to fill out and collection review process that we have to do with collections that come in. And that is for digital materials or physical materials. They are treated, the accrual process is the same. The difference is access portion. The access portion to digital materials is a little different because we want to make sure that you need like PPI, any personal identification information that is sensitive. We don't want to make that accessible to the world because otherwise we have to redact that materials. And then if any like email or anything, the archival profession is still dealing with how to put access to like email materials. And then if it's photograph materials, then we need some more information from you, the donor, about what's going on in the photo and why it's historically significant. The book that is mentioned in the PowerPoint is called Creating Family Archives, and it's from Gaylord. And I will put the link in the chat in a minute. But I also put the link in the chat to the form, so make sure you fill it out to be entered into the raffle. Any other questions? Is anyone working on a photo album or a photo or family history project right now? You can talk if you wish. That might be easier if you want to put it in the chat. Okay, the photos, grandparents, so hundreds and hundreds of photos. Many people we do not know. We're gonna have a whole bookcase, get them all. Yeah, I mean, that, if you don't know them, sometimes it's like, you know, it isn't important enough for your family to keep them. If you can't identify anyone, sometimes, you know, if it's something, if you can identify where they are, you can try to donate them to an archive in that location. Because we do, like here, even at Avery, we have a photo collection that's a folder, and it's called unidentified men, unidentified women, but it's like Black people in Charleston. And so sometimes, even though you may not be of interest to people, just want to document Black life in Charleston, right? They don't really care who it is. And so if you can identify, like if they're in London or if they are in, you know, in Egypt or something, you can try to find a repository that kind of looking at Black in travel or Black and international archives, to kind of donate those materials to that archive, so that they can get a better sense of use. So we can definitely talk, Vicki, you know, offline about what that actually looks like for you all. Because what is also happening is, if it's, there's also an effort to document Black beauty culture. And so there is an archive called Black Beauty Archives, basically. And if you have a family member that it was in cosmetology or a barber, they are interested in that story of Black in beauty, Black in fashion. And so they are interested in collecting that aspect of Black life. And so there are archives that are special, related to specific areas of interest. And so you can consider donating your family records to there. Another example is there is some archive interested in like Black or women in travel or women in science. And so you can consider donating your family records to that entity, and then you get different kind of exposure to your family history than if you kept it in a repository that may not be as relevant to that type of materials. The other way to like preserve, like Ms. Mayo talked about, you know, storage. Gaylord is one vendor. The Container Store also has some, you want to make sure you look for acid free, is the kind of the term you want to make sure that you look for when you're looking for supplies. For example, if you wrote your wedding dress or a christening gown, you know, there are particular boxes you can purchase that can preserve those items for generations. Similar, if you have artifacts, you know, medals, trophies, sculptures, you know, make sure that those are also preserved and in different containers, so that they won't be able to be, I guess, broken, and you can able to keep those in different ways. So each type, like not just paper, not just photos, but also artifacts, three-dimensional things. If you have paintings that are faded, there are also conservators that are out there that you can work with to bring that item back to life. So those are different types of objects that you can think about your family history is within.
Aisha?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to maintaining a stable temperature. I'm quite sure some people in our audience is probably wondering, well, what is a stable temperature? For optimum conditions, it's either 65 degrees Fahrenheit and, excuse me, 45 degrees relative humidity, plus or minus 5 degrees. Hopefully that will help people understand what a stable temperature would be.
Mm-hmm. I put the link to the book in the chat as well. Anyone have any problem objects that they're working with? Or success story too. Please place the book. Yes, the book in the link is to the, sorry. The link to the book in the PowerPoint is listed in the chat. I will do it one more time. And I can also put the link to the kit in the chat. So also in the kit, I mentioned this earlier, that there is a genealogy chart in the kit so that you can chart your genealogy. It goes back a long time as well. So you can, if you have a long family history that you can definitely chart that thing out. And then if you know where you see your gaps are, that will also help. So when you start your family history, you want to start with the people closest to you that you can get access to is really the main thing. And then you reach out to there. People want to go to an archive immediately, but that's not necessarily always the best starting spot because we don't know your family history and we may not have anything linked to your family. When you approach an archive like Avery, about your family history, you want to make sure that you have, the names, the dates, some kind of connection to the repository. If there's a church record or an organization that they were a part of, then that is a way to try to find your family history in the archive. You can also look at federal records and city records to find like deed of gifts, property transfer deeds, or any kind of vital records. And also a way to find people. And then newspapers is another place to find people if you just navigate where things are. Okay, Greg saying he has 6,000 people on his family history. Goodness gracious. And Greg, he just wrote a book about Edisto. And so check out his book. You can put the link to your book in the chat, Greg. People probably want to. One question people have, so I have all this history, so what? So what you can do is kind of do what Greg is doing or did, write a book about your family history. You can do a digital exhibit about your family history and place your family in context in terms of what's going on in the world. You can work on getting a quilt made of your family history so that your family history can be looked at on a quilt. There's other, if you, a recent story that has been making the news is out of Harvard University. Tamara Lanier, her family, she ended up tracking her relative Renty, who was an enslaved person, and he was, photographed with the lashes on his back, right? And so she was being an advocate for her family. And so trying to get those images back from Harvard as they're profiting from them. So depending on how you find or where your family ends up being, you can end up being an advocate for them. You end up doing a landmark status, register status for your family history. And that kind of goes back to what Erica was talking about in terms of interpreting the Black experience. And that is how your family can play into history. Well, it is 10 minutes to 1. I think make sure that you fill out the form to be entered into the raffle. I will put the link back in. And if there are any last minute questions, we can conclude today, but we are always available. You can contact us on our website, which is listed here. Wait a minute. Just navigating between different screens. Okay, thank you, Erica. Is there a special archive for Black veterans? So the Veteran Project is our Library of Congress, and they are collecting materials from all veterans, no matter what race they are. And there are like Civil War. There are a few like Civil War museums. I'm not sure how big their collections are, but that is another, I guess, depending on what are you talking about, an archive. Are you looking to donate photos and documents, or is it physical items? And that will depend on where it could possibly be located at. Thank you everyone for attending. We hope that you engage with the materials, and if you have any other questions, please do reach out. There will be next week, I will be presenting as a partnership between Avery and the LAC, as Erica mentioned, and the East Side Neighborhood Center on community archiving. We were talking about creating community archives and what does that look like. It's a little different than family, but some similar issues as well. Yeah, May 20th, not next week, May 27th, right at 6 p.m. And then next Wednesday at 6 p.m., we have a conversation with Dr. Sharice Jones Branch talking about Black women social clubs. And so that's another kind of interest of people is, clubs or organizations to document Black women experiences with that. So stay tuned and register for those 2 events. And it's been good seeing you all. I will stop recording now. And if you have any personal materials you want to talk about, we'll be here for the next 10 minutes. Thank you all.